and welcome into Cullman Today. I'm Debbie Wood, and we have a very special guest this morning. Joyce Clark is with us. She is the Alabama State Director for Carson for President 2016. We want to welcome her to Cullman this morning, and so good to see you this morning. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. It really
Well, we're
is.
so glad to get to meet you this morning, and I have to say, and I want everybody to know that I have been for Dr. Ben Carson for a good while, and last year, right after the first of the year, I called the state Republican headquarters and said, I want to volunteer, I want to give parties, events, whatever. And they said, oh, they laughed at me. They said, oh, it's too early. You'll have to wait. And so I never heard from anyone until back in December. And the end of December, actually, I think it might have been January. Anyway, I was walking in the park doing exercise that morning with a friend, got a phone call from the nicest young man in Tennessee with the Ben Carson campaign.
Good.
And he said, somehow we got your name and number. And I'm like, yay. So I love Dr. Ben Carson. Heard his speech, his prayer breakfast. It was awesome.
Wasn't that something? That
Now,
really
you were
was.
already supportive of him before that happened.
That actually was my main introduction. I had heard of him and all of the wonderful things he had done as a surgeon.
Right.
But when I heard him speak, that was a changing point for me. That really was. And so I did something similar. I read about him online and found that that there was a small group called Run Ben Run, and that's what everyone was trying to convince him to do, was that we needed him as our president.
Yes.
So I volunteered for that and sent a little bit of money, and I got a phone call that said, would you go to Montgomery for the winter dinner, the Republican winter dinner? And I said, okay, and he said, I want you to have a little booth there for Ben Carson and get people to sign up and give out some brochures and books. And I said, sure, I can do that. So I did. That was my very first assignment. So I tried to do that along with my full-time job at Huntsville Hospital for a while, but that got to be a bit much. So I actually left my job at the hospital to do my full-time volunteer job. Because I felt this is what I've been called to do.
Exactly. You feel so strong about it, don't you?
You really
and folks,
do.
we're talking about over 22 years at Huntsville Hospital. Is that correct?
Right.
Nursing. And so she feels so strong about this that she gave that up to be a volunteer. Have you had, share with us a little bit about the journey so far.
So Vernon Robinson was the one who actually recruited me, and he said, have you ever would you go to CPAC? And that's the Conservative Political Action Committee that's held, the meetings held every year, and it's coming up in March, the 2nd through the 5th, and that's all of the conservatives who come and speak. And he said, would you work at the booth there? And he said, if you can pay your way there, I'll give you a ticket to get in to work. So that's what I did, and met lots and lots of wonderful people. And one of the people I met was the person who ended up being the Arizona state director. So then they asked me then if she and I would go to the Texas State Convention. Now that is an experience.
I bet.
We worked from 7A to 7P. See that I'm talking like a nurse.
Right.
7A to 7P on our feet all day long in the Fort Worth Convention Center.
And this was back in the summer?
This was the following summer.
Yes,
this has been this has been like 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago now. And busy, but the Texans did love him, and we got just pages and pages of volunteers. So that was very exciting. But the Texas, it's a very different environment. I said I felt like a liberal out there.
Did you?
And I am by no means a liberal, but they were very interested in his stand on the Second Amendment, on gun rights, and certainly he does. And he was in ROTC, and he says that he enjoys having a gun. He doesn't enjoy feeling that he needs one, but he has one and knows how to shoot it if he has to.
If he has to.
And he certainly, what I like his explanation is that we need our weapons not only to protect us from outside enemies, but also within our own country if the government oversteps its boundaries.
Sure.
And that happens in countries sometimes, and we hope it will never be here. But our founding fathers, that was one of the reasons they wrote the Second Amendment.
Absolutely, it was. And he feels so strong about that, and so that's such a wonderful thing. So many people have said, well, you've got to read his book that he wrote, and I still have not, and seen the movie. I think he has a little movie, and I haven't done that yet, but said it's just awesome.
Gifted Hands.
Gifted Hands.
And that was written long before he had anything to do with it.
Wasn't it?
Yes, and that's really about his story of the very difficult childhood that he had, and then the successful separation of the babies that were conjoined at the heads. But it was the first time that it had been successfully done. And seeing that movie really explains why we are such supporters of him. Being a nurse, the most successful doctors are ones who are humble enough to ask for someone else to help. And he studied and studied and studied because this had never been done before successfully. The problem with that surgery was that the babies or children, he's a pediatric neurosurgeon, so he said that the problem was that they always hemorrhaged to death. So he consulted then the cardiologist, the hematologist, all the people then, and found ways that they would be able to chill the blood and be able to have longer to do, but they still only had 20 hours, being they had many, many people just because they had to have 2 patients and the whole staff for 2 patients. And so it was very, very complicated. And so he actually had dress rehearsals and told the people this, and we'll have to stand here, we'll have to stand here, we have to do this, because time was really of the essence for that. So, and it was successful, and I really believe that's how he would lead our country. He would be prepared. He would ask the other experts. He's the best listener.
He is a good listener, isn't he?
He is a good listener, and that's why some people are critical of that, because he's more quiet. But my husband always says, when you're speaking, you're not learning anything.
That's exactly right. I was just getting ready to say the same thing. That's so true. And he's constantly learning, isn't he?
He really does. And, 5 of our founding fathers were physicians. Some people say, why should a physician be able to? But they have a way of solving problems using the scientific method. If this, then that, rather than always being a lawyer. They are taught to convince people to believe the way they do. Right. And there's certainly a need for that at times too, but with the complex problems that we have in our country and in the world, I think we need someone just exactly like him, who is absolutely brilliant, compassionate, humble, and just always learning. And he really would bring us back together. He, I believe, is the only candidate that would do that.
I totally agree with you. And last night I saw him with Megyn Kelly on Fox, and he handled it wonderfully. He did a beautiful job, and a lot of good questions, and he was able to, and he said, I don't have the answers for everything, basically. But there are people out there that I plan to pull in, and that can help me with those. And so I think he certainly is the. Let's talk a little bit of the band for the job. This book too. Tell us about how this one came about.
So John Philip Sousa IV, he's the great-great-grandson of the composer that wrote many of the marches and other types of music. Okay. He and another man, Bill Saraceno in California, also heard the prayer breakfast, and they are the ones who really got this movement going. And so it just went off like wildfire, Run, Ben, Run. So we have the little pool banners, and I brought one of those too, and it was Run, Ben, Run, and then we had to change it to Win, Ben, Win once he committed to running. So that was my birthday present. I got to go on my birthday to Detroit when he announced that he was going to run, and that was where he grew up, in Detroit, and he had it in the music hall because he's an avid music lover. He especially loves classical music, and you'll read about that in some of his books, but he he always listened to that while he was doing his surgeries. But he said even as a young person, his older brother Curtis had a huge influence on him, and he is an engineer, an aerospace engineer.
Oh, that's
so
great.
these two little boys, and I don't know if you know the story about their mother. She was had to drop out of school
Yes.
in 3rd grade, but she was determined that her boys would be successful,
Yes, I love
and made them turn off the TV. They could watch 2 hours a week of TV, but they
I
had to
love
read
it.
2 books and give her a report on each of them.
I know it.
And people have said, well, why'd you do that? When your mother was working 2 and 3 jobs, she wasn't there to make you do it. He said, back then when our parents said to do something, we did it.
You
did
did
it,
it,
you know.
yeah.
And he said, my mother changed my
That's good.
life with a library card. And I love that. Of
isn't
course,
that
they
wonderful?
couldn't afford to buy books, but
With
you
the
can go to the
card.
library.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So he's been everywhere. I mean, he's been through it, and he knows. And look how he's.
Mhm. And he has either lived or visited 52 countries, so he's lived in other countries. And I lived in France for 5 years. My husband was transferred there with his company, and so that's another reason I am so involved in this, because I lived in a socialist country for
Yes.
5 years and saw the problems with that, about how they pinpoint children very early on and determine the government determines who's going to be successful, what schools they're going to go to, rather than the parents or the school. And so I saw that and how backward that was. And medicine,
Oh, it's terrible, isn't it?
it really, yes, it's way behind where we are as far as medicine goes, because
Right.
the government involvement. So when we let the people, and that's what Dr. Carson always says, when we the people take over, look out, we can make things happen. And that's why our country has been so successful. But I'm worried right now. I'm very, very concerned about our country, and he is too. He said he wasn't looking for a job. He thought he would retire and learn to play the organ and play some golf.
Right.
But he said he thought the Lord just had another plan for him, and that's the other thing. He just trusts in the Lord with all his heart.
He does, doesn't he?
He
You can
really
just
does,
feel it
and
see it.
and he's not, shy about it. That's
Right.
He said everything he has been a gift from the Lord. He gave him his sweet Candy, his wife.
She is precious, isn't she?
She
I've
is.
never
I
met either
had
one,
the-
but I just love to watch
I had
her
the pleasure
too.
to meet her.
She's sort of
and-
like I am. She's a hugger. She goes to everybody when they finish these caucuses and forums, and she just hugs everybody. It doesn't
It's
matter who it
amazing.
is. Yeah.
Oh,
I
she
noticed
is
that.
just so down to earth. We would be so proud to have her as our First Lady. And
We would.
and she spoke at the Alabama Republican Women's meeting last year, and there was a little lull between a reception and then the dinner, and we heard this music, and she was in the out in the lobby just playing the piano.
away. Isn't that awesome?
Just totally comfortable wherever she is.
Oh, see, that's awesome. And that was in Mobile, right? Did that happen? There was.
That was in Birmingham.
That was in Birmingham. Okay. I know he had a big meeting or.
He had a
dinner,
rally in Mobile.
and it was very well received.
Mhm.
What can we do as a community, in our community? What do we need to be doing? We need to be talking with people. Everybody hasn't made a decision yet, and it's
Right.
a very important thing to talk with people and get the word out there, and then encourage everybody to go vote, because so many people don't vote.
Exactly. That's what they said, that the evangelicals did not vote in our last election, and
Right.
that's why we have the results that we do.
Yes.
And we really must vote. And I believe if you will listen to Dr. Carson, he won't shout at you. You have to listen to him, but
Right.
what you will hear is certainly worth hearing. Also, go on his webpage. He has a policy written that anyone can understand, but it's for everything, even cyber safety against a cyber attack. He has, of course, his tax plan. I really like the 14.9%
Tell us,
for
share with
everyone.
us a little bit about that. How
Well,
does that
everyone would pay the same.
Okay.
Up until a percentage over the poverty level. But he
Okay.
said even the people who are at the poverty level will pay a little bit, because he said he believes that everyone should pay a little something, and we feel better when we take part in something, in just even a small way.
So true.
And so his main way to get the $19 trillion deficit under control would be to have a hiatus for companies that if we will bring them back from other countries, they won't be taxed at all for 1 to 2 years and tax-free. Well, it would certainly be a good incentive, and then the requirement would be for them to hire our people who are out of work.
Yes.
And so working together with our companies and making it's not a bad thing to be wealthy. We want our children to aspire to have comfortable way of life, and the things that you can do. I was talking to a young person who happened to be for somebody on the other side and on the other party, and he said, well, he just started quizzing me. He said, "How did you get here tonight?" I said, "Well, I drove in my car." "And how did you get that car?" "I paid for it with the job that I earn." "And what did you drive on?" "I drove on the roads that my taxes pay." And so I think they're just missing the point of how things work best. They think it's not good to be successful, but the wonderful things you can do with money. You can help people, you can. And I pointed out some of the very, very wealthy people that over the years that started libraries and wonderful things that they have done. So we want our children to have that goal rather than to be supported by the government.
Oh, absolutely. So his tax plan basically 14.5%?
14.9.
14.9, okay.
For everyone.
Across the board, that's everybody. So,
and they said, well, is that fair? Somebody who makes $1 billion. They said, 14.9% of $1 billion is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
We'll take that.
Sure,
you know,
absolutely.
And
a lot more than they're paying currently, I'm sure.
Right,
So,
right. And there won't be the loopholes.
All
you know,
the
it'll be
loopholes.
Across the board. That's what you'll do.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. Well, we just we want to say thank you for what you've done to try to help get Ben elected. Dr. Carson
It's been
elected.
an honor. It really has. And the people that I have met, I just spent 11 days in Iowa. I volunteered to go out there and help in the Cedar Rapids office, and that was a real honor. And he actually preached at the church service that I went to that Sunday,
really?
And it was a beautiful
So
sermon.
you are what they say in the South, fired up then after
Fired
hearing
up.
all this.
Exactly.
Getting to meet him and see him firsthand.
Yes.
You're doing the things that I would like to have been able to do. So we want to again say thank you for what you're doing, and it's not too late, folks. You just got to get the word out there, and there's so many people that don't know.
Right.
And they haven't made their decision. So talk with them and about Dr. Ben Carson and see if we can't get him elected. Now, where do we go from here? After Super Tuesday, depends on how soon will we know if we're
going to know a lot after Super Tuesday because there are so many states who are voting. But Alabama, we definitely can do this. Just go to bencarson.com and read his policies and read about his life. You will just be so amazed, and he is just so methodical and organized and humble that I think you will just be as swept away as we all have been.
Absolutely. So we'll know more on Tuesday. So get out and vote.
Be sure you vote.
Yes, just such an important thing. So thank you, Joyce. And of course, with us this morning, Joyce Clark. She is the Alabama State Director, Volunteer Director for Ben Carson for 2016. And we'll be back with more of Cullman Today right after this.